All right, well, welcome to the live Q&A. Here, a follow-up to last Tuesday's live Bible study with Andrew and Julianne. And today, what I'm going to be doing is going over a few more of the questions that didn't get answered last week with Andrew. And so we've selected a few more. I can't promise I'll get through all of the ones that didn't get answered, but I'll try and cover a few more of them. And so the first question that I have here is from TMY on chat. I don't know if that's pronounced Timmy or if that's just TMY. So the question here is, if Solomon was so wise, how did he go so wrong? And you may ask yourself that same question about a lot of people. You may say, if that guy knew God so well, how did he mess up? You know, if David was a man after God's own heart, how did he mess up so bad and murder somebody and commit adultery, things like that? So again, Solomon, Andrew talked about Solomon a lot in the last Bible study. And so the question being, if the Bible says, if God himself said, no one has ever been like Solomon and no one ever will be like him afterwards, how did he go so wrong? He had supernatural wisdom. And so the real thing here is that just because you know something doesn't mean that you do it. You know, if you look at Ecclesiastes, Solomon even says, like, even wisdom can be vanity, right? You can have all the knowledge and know exactly what to do and not follow it. See, a lot of people, you know, people who walk away from God, they know better. And yet, like Andrew was sharing last week, if you let your heart harden, you can little by little stop caring about the right things and start caring about other things. And we see that with Solomon, where he had a heart that was focused on God. He was humble. He was meek. He was pursuing God. I mean, we always talk about the supernatural wisdom that God gave Solomon, but it was already a lot of wisdom for him to request understanding and wisdom. So he started off wise already because he was wise enough to be humble. But as time went on, he let his heart harden. And again, that's what Andrew's warning is, that can happen to anybody. You can never get to a place in this lifetime where your heart couldn't go the other direction. Now, like Andrew shared, if you have a lot of momentum going the right direction, then that helps you. Same way that momentum going the wrong direction is harder to turn around. Momentum going the right direction can help you keep going the right direction. Sometimes that can even be dangerous because you might not realize that you're coasting on fumes. You know, luckily I've almost done this a few times, where you're driving and you run out of gas and you can still go for a while. You don't realize it, and then you're like, I'm in trouble. You know, same thing, if you're running really fast, you might stop trying to run, but you still keep moving forward a little bit. So sometimes we might let our hearts drift from God and not even realize it. And once we realize it, it's something that happened 6 months ago or a year ago or 10 years ago, and we might not realize that we lost our focus. We stopped feeding ourselves. You know, I was going to say I work a lot, but you know, many of us, I'm sure, are busy. And so sometimes I get caught up in work and I forget to eat. And so I just don't eat lunch, or I don't eat breakfast, don't eat lunch. And others ask me, like, how do you forget how to eat? I love to eat, and I love to eat too. But when you're focused on something, it's easy to not notice you stop doing something. But I promise that if I missed eating 2 days in a row, 3 days in a row, I will notice. So same thing, you may not notice you've drifted from God, but you will notice eventually if you don't course correct. One thing we see is that King David, he also messed up, but humility was actually more important than wisdom because he was humble enough to run back to God when he messed up. And Solomon, we don't see him doing that. Right? In 1 Kings 11, verse 4, it says, "For it was so when Solomon was old that his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not loyal to the Lord his God, as was the heart of his father David." And if you look at Proverbs, Solomon wrote most of Proverbs, and if not all of it, and he had the wisdom. He wrote so many things about don't let women turn you astray, don't let bad company turn you astray. So he knew better. He had the wisdom, but he didn't follow it. So again, it's about that inner commitment and just daily, like Julianne said last week, little decisions every single day that keep us on track. So the next question, Tina on Facebook, and this is more of a practical question, but it's a question about Icarus. So can I bring my tablet and you download the curriculum onto my existing tablet? And so the answer to that is no. Icarus is a prepackaged thing. The iPad is included. It comes with some other little things like headphones and a case and things like that. That's all included. If for some reason you don't want another iPad or another tablet, there's other forms of distance education that you could do, like Keras Online. We also have correspondence, and then we have eKeras, of course. So Keras Online is something that you could do with your existing tablet if you wanted to. So now I'll jump back to the other questions about the topic. So Sylvia on YouTube asked the question, do you have to prepare your heart for some time, maybe days or years, before you can say you will not fall prey to the enemy's tricks or temptations? So basically, is there like a certain amount of time that once you meet that, then you're safe? And I would say it's not really like that. It's not really a level that you reach. That, it's more of a lifestyle. It's not like, well, because I reached this level, I can coast from now on. Because at any point, if you start coasting, you're actually going to be rolling backwards. I like what Andrew said about gravity, right? Your flesh is always trying to pull you back into the lust of the flesh. The flesh always wants to be in charge, no matter how long you've been a believer. So the minute you stop walking in the Spirit, you automatically start walking in the flesh. It's like gravity, always trying to pull you down. The flesh is always trying to draw you back, and it will if it can. But praise God, the Spirit's stronger if we are walking in the Spirit. So one thing I do want to mention, though, is that you don't have to wait a certain amount of time before you can overcome temptation and tricks and lies of the enemy. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13. 1 Corinthians 10:13 says, no temptation has overtaken you except such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will also make the way of escape that you may be able to bear it. So again, even cold turkey, even if you've been walking in sin nonstop every single moment, every single time you have a fork in the road, you choose the wrong path and the wrong path and the wrong path. God has made a way. So even if all your momentum is going in the wrong direction, the Spirit of Christ is inside of you. There is a way of escape. You can turn back to who you are in the Spirit and avoid that. And so it's not like, because the reason why I wanted to mention this, it's not good to disqualify ourselves and say, well, I've been making so many mistakes. I just have the wrong momentum. There's nothing I could do about it, right? We should never disqualify ourselves, no matter how many mistakes we made. You might have just made a mistake 2 seconds ago. It's not a bad time to turn around. That's actually the best time to turn around, is as soon as you notice that you're going the wrong direction. So again, the more we keep our hearts sensitive to God, the easier it is to do the right thing, and the easier it is to avoid the wrong thing. I know Andrew teaches on this, but whatever you focus on gets magnified. If you focus on God all day long, he's going to look really big, and that temptation will look really small. If you focus on lust of the flesh all day long, then that'll start to look bigger, and God will start to look smaller. And so then when temptation comes, you're like, I just got to do it. I'm sorry, I got to do it. And so again, a lot of it's about what we focus on. So Victor, and I guess your nickname is Above, Victor Above on Facebook, asked the question, how often do we have to prepare our hearts, or is it a one-time thing? It's like I was just saying, it's more of a lifestyle. Your inner man, when you got born again, that's a one-time thing. That transformation was complete in the Spirit. One time, you're done. But Romans 14, verse 23. So Romans 14:23, the second half of that says, whatever is not from faith is sin. Right? So if it's not from faith, it's sin. Those are your two options. So basically, you're saying if you're not walking in faith, it's sin. And that's why walking in the flesh is sin, because if you're walking in the flesh, you're not walking in faith. And so by definition, it has to be considered sin. It might not necessarily be something like abnormally bad, right? Like stealing or lying or killing or something like that. It can just be anything that you're doing because you don't have faith in God. It's all, in God's eyes, it's all equally bad, even though in the natural there's different kinds of consequences. So even if you do good things in the natural, say you love to give, and you give and give and give, and suddenly you stop giving because of faith and you start giving just because of what people think about you. You've stepped out, even though you're giving, nothing changed on the surface. You've stepped out of walking by faith. You've stepped into walking in the flesh. And another way of saying that is that you're now walking in sin because you've stepped out of God's grace. So, LaDondrea, I apologize if I said that wrong, LaDondrea Scott on Facebook said, how do you know when you're getting close to a breakthrough? And I like this question, right? Because we want breakthrough. We want to see God do amazing things in our life or in someone else's life. So how do we know we're getting close? And sometimes people say, and I've said this too, we say, when you're getting extra opposition, that means you're getting really close to a breakthrough, right? The enemy sees that and is trying to stop you. And that might be true, but I don't like that one. That's not my favorite, at least, because I don't want to have to look at the devil to find out what God is doing. I'd rather just look at God to find out what God is doing. And so, yes, it may be encouraging if you have lots of opposition, to think, well, if I have all this opposition, it's because I'm about to have a breakthrough. That might be encouraging in that moment, but to me, I don't want to live my life caring about that. It's like, I don't care if there's opposition or not. I want to see what God has for me. So, it depends what you mean by that, right? How do we know we're about to have breakthrough? See, if you mean, how do I know I'm about to see it in the natural? Then the answer to that question is when you see it in the Spirit. When you see it in the Spirit, that's what faith is. I have evidence, substance. Faith is evidence of things not seen, right? I know that it's true because in the Spirit, I already see it. And so as soon as you have faith, then you know it's about to happen in the natural. But if what you mean by your question is, when will I see it in the Spirit? When is it going to happen in the Spirit? Then I would say, you're close to a breakthrough when you start seeking. Right? Jesus said, seek and you will find, sow and you will reap. So the minute you start sowing, you know that breakthrough is close. The minute that you start seeking, you know that breakthrough is close because you're digging. Right? Think about digging for gold. And this is an example that always blesses me, so I hope it blesses some of you. If you're digging for gold, and you dig and dig and dig and dig, and finally you hit gold, which shovelful of dirt was most important? Right? See, when you get to the final goal, you realize every single one of those shovelfuls was important. If I hadn't done that one, if I hadn't done shovelful number 3, there was no gold in that one, but that one helped me get to where there was. And so same thing, it's like you may not notice, which moment with God is the one that led to my breakthrough? Which verse did I read that led to breakthrough? Which time of worship, which time of prayer, which revelation was the key? And you may know, that's the one that was the moment with God where the breakthrough happened. But there's all these other ones that played a part in that. I hope that makes sense. All of it's worthwhile. It's kind of like something Greg Fritz says is, you don't have to understand how food works to eat it. So when you eat food, you're getting nourishment in your body. It's helping you. You don't have to know which bite is the one that gave you these amazing muscles, right? You don't have to understand how it works. It's an accumulation. Again, it's a lifestyle. When you walk with God, you grow, you start to experience breakthrough. When you seek, you find. So just have that confidence. To me, life is full of breakthroughs. It doesn't have to just be one big moment. I love those big moments. I mean, they're fantastic. But really, all the little moments are usually how you get there. So next question. Kange Lankosi Ishmael on YouTube asked the question, how do I find out who I am in the Spirit? That's an excellent question. And the answer is very simple, in the Word, right? And I'll go in a little bit more in depth. But, 2 Corinthians 5, verse 17 says, if anyone's in Christ, he is a new creation. Old things have passed away. Behold, all things have become new. So if you're in Christ, if you've been born again, old things have passed away. You're a new creation, right? Everything's new in your life. So to me, if you want to find out who you are, spend time finding out who Jesus is, because he's the one that you're in and Christ is in you. So again, that's what happens when we get born again, is we become new creations. So the more we study who he is, we can discover more of who we are. So when we see the words say that God is love, you say, well, if God's in me, that means I'm love. So I might not look like that in the natural, but in my spirit, that's who I really am. The more you discover who you really are, the more you'll start acting like yourself, right? Acting like the new you. And so, again, the more you study Christ, you study what God is like, his heart, his character. And again, Jesus is the best way to know God because he said, I'm the fullness of the Godhead, represented God, bodily in this world. And so when we find out love is patient, love is kind, that means that you are patient, you are kind. When we see the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, and many others, you can read that and say, if that's the fruit of the Spirit, that's inside of me. So I encourage you to listen to Andrew's teaching on spirit, soul, and body, many other teachings on our identity, because that's powerful. It's amazing because the Word can be like a mirror for our spirit, right? It's reflecting to us who we are. You look in the mirror, see what you look like in the natural. You look in the Word, and you can see what you're like in the Spirit. Now, you have to rightly divide, of course. You don't want to just take some weird verse and try and apply it the wrong way. So next question. Lynn D. on chat. So your question is, how do I stand for healing during the day while I'm not working? Do I have to say a prayer out loud? So that's a very good question. I would say you can pray 24/7 out loud to stand in faith 24/7, but I don't think that's the best way. Because see, the thing is, if we can only stand in faith when we're praying out loud, then it's very easy for that to get derailed. all the enemy has to do, or all your circumstances have to do, is throw you a curveball. You know, if you have some emergency happen, suddenly you're like, I'm too busy to pray right now. And now you'll feel disqualified. You'll feel like you stepped out of the Spirit and that now you're on your own. So to me, I don't like that, because I don't like disqualifying myself ever. I don't want to think, well, I'm in worship, so I feel spiritual, but I'm brushing my teeth, so I don't feel spiritual. Or I'm reading the Bible, so I feel spiritual. If someone attacked me right now, I know I could stand in faith. If any opposition came right now, I know I would respond the right way. But when I'm washing the dishes, nothing, I don't feel spiritual, so I might respond in the flesh, right? So to me, it's not about that. God is with us 24/7. He's always with us. And so standing in faith all day long means that we can be standing in faith when we're doing mundane things, when we're washing the car, washing the dishes, when we're going on a walk, when we're taking out the trash, when we're playing with our kids, when we're eating at a restaurant. It doesn't have to be a special moment to stand in faith. It can be all day long. So it doesn't have to feel spiritual, and it doesn't have to look spiritual for it to actually be spiritual. See, I like Andrew's example that he uses for this, is that standing in faith is very similar to standing in fear, right? Worrying. See, when you're worried about something, you don't have to confess your worry nonstop. You don't have to try to stay worried and say, basically, if you're worried about something, you just think about it all day long. For a while, you might think about it very focused and freak out. Other times you might have hypothetical situations like, oh my goodness, well, if this happens, there's another bad thing that could happen, and there's another bad thing that could happen. We start playing it over in our minds. You might watch a movie for an hour and a half and forget about it for a little bit, but every now and then during the movie you remember, like, oh yeah, this thing's going to happen. But then you kind of escape into the movie. Then as soon as the movie's over, though, you're like, oh yeah, back to reality. I'm scared that this is going to happen. So again, worry is very easy. It's just something that comes and goes. Sometimes you're just aware of it. Sometimes you think about it. Sometimes you talk about it. Same thing with standing in faith. Sometimes you talk about it. Sometimes you think about it, and you have hypotheticals of like, I'm so excited. God promised me this. And if he promised me that, I bet that promise is for me also. And that promise is for me also. And you start thinking about it, daydreaming. And other times you might forget about it, and then you remember. Because see, if you're scared, if you're worried, you kind of can't help yourself, right? You feel like no matter how hard I try, the worry keeps coming back. Same thing with faith. You can be walking in faith where it's like, man, no matter how much I might forget or might do something else for a little while, I can't help it. I just keep thinking about what God's promised me and that it's true. And so again, we daydream about it. We're just aware of it sometimes. We might intentionally focus on it. So to me, it's great to focus intentionally, but don't feel condemned if you're like, well, I can't think about it nonstop right now because I got to feed my kids. I have to give them a bath. I have to wash the dog. You can still have it in the back of your mind or just in your heart bouncing around while you do other things also. That's the thing I like about God, is that prayer isn't just about talking nonstop, right? Prayer isn't even just about letting him talk. Sometimes conversation is just communion, where you just spend time together, where it's like you just are sitting next to each other, enjoying something together, where it's like, I'm not making food right now. God and I are making food right now. And it's okay, I'm not talking about my healing or something else. We're doing this together. I'm still in communion with him. And I keep remembering like, oh yeah, I am healed. So, next question. Ashley Sharon on chat asked the question, I was saved 7 years ago. Now I have to force myself to read the Word. How do I regain the joy I had when I was first saved? And my answer to this, I'm not trying to be facetious or anything, but I'd say get to know God more. The more we get to know God, the more exciting he becomes. See, anything that's finite, you can get bored of. If there's a limit, you can get bored of that because you're like, I know God, all there is to know. So I'm bored. Been there, done that. But see, if we know God in his infiniteness, he'll never get boring. Psalm 34 verse 8 says, oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man who trusts in him. Right, taste and see. See, if we feel bored, it's because we feel like there's nowhere else to go. And that means that there's something we're not aware of. Either we believe a lie, or, I guess in both senses we believe a lie. Either we believe that there's no more to know, or we just don't realize that there's more to know. Right? But if we realize God is infinite, there's more to know. And see, again, it's not just about information, where I'm not just reading a profile of God and it's like, wow, that's pretty fantastic. We get to live life with God. Living life with God will never get boring. Because I've been in that boat where, I remember, this was over 20 years ago. It was about 20 years ago. I told God, what's left? I've learned everything there is to know. What's left in the Christian life for me? Obviously, I didn't know everything, but at that moment, I genuinely felt that way, and I wasn't trying to be arrogant. I was just being very humble with I was aware that something must be off, right? I was very humble about me being confused. And so I was like, God, what on earth is there to learn? I've learned it all. I know everything. I grew up in the church. Good parents taught me great things. I learned a whole bunch. I studied a lot. And God just basically showed me, like, how about you live life with me and we see if you know everything, right? And just kind of come on this adventure with me and you'll never be bored. And so, again, I would say get to know God more. Because, again, it's like if you have a menu at a restaurant, you could read the menu and read the menu and read the menu and eventually get bored of the menu. But if you realize that, wait, I can actually eat these things, that sounds amazing. And so you start ordering stuff off the menu. Now you've got way more enjoyment than you've ever had before. And then you realize, like, wait, the chef is Jesus and he's going to make different foods every single moment, every single day. There's new things I can order and experience. It's infinite. You would never get bored of that. I know food's not the best example for some of us, but again, it's much more than just food, right? I'm just saying, God never runs out. Life with God doesn't run out. Living life with God doesn't run out. I hope that encourages you because, again, I've been in that boat. I apologize for that, where you're afraid of being bored. But trust me, God is not boring. There's nothing boring about his kingdom. There are boring things about Christianity, the religion. There might be boring things about how you're currently going about life. But underneath some of the surfacey things, God is amazing. You'll never, ever get bored. You'll never run out of new things to discover with him, to explore with him, to get to know with him, to do with him, living life with him. Ask him, what are you into? What do you want to do today? There's so many amazing things. God is a creator. He's infinite. He'll never run out of things to create. You're in his image, so you're a creator. So you both are creators, and two creators hanging out are not going to get bored together if we know that that's who we are. So I'd encourage you to not be afraid. I'm not saying, like, look outside of the Bible. I'm saying look deeper into what the Word already says to experience even more what's being described there. Again, it's like a marriage license. Don't just look at your marriage license and say, if you're married, well, that's my marriage. Well, no, that's not your marriage. That's revealing the opportunity you have. Marriage is living life together with your spouse. And so, anyway, that's all the questions I can get to for today. I hope that some of those were a blessing to you. I hope you can stick around till 6 o'clock. Carrie Pickett and Daniel Amstutz will be ministering to you both. Daniel Amstutz will also be ministering at the Healing is Here conference next week, so I encourage you to tune in for that also. So have a great rest of your evening. Goodbye.